I didn't mean to kill my daughter. 75 seconds. The last time I asked my wife how much longer she'd be in the shower, it's what she'd said. It wasn't just over a minute or a little bit. It was exactly 75 seconds because my wife was a very precise person. Punctual, on time, she wouldn't be there in 10, she'd be there in 8.5 minutes. She was a woman who can count the times she's been late on one hand and still loses sleep over it. I realize I'm giving the wrong impression. My wife, Kathleen, is by no means crazy. She simply has a better sense of time than most and likes to show it off. She doesn't even have a watch. A game of ours is when I'll ask her the hour and she'll say the time while only ever being off by a few minutes. So, when she told the doctors that I was unconscious for a minute or two, I was a little shocked. I knew she was mad at me then. The hospital's policy is to keep you for at least one night if you lose consciousness for any amount of time. Longer than 30 seconds, and it was a 3-day minimum. They were more concerned about my lapse of memory surrounding the moment when I hit my head. I know I was fixing the basement stairs. I remembered a brief jolt of panic as I fell, knowing my skull would slap against the stone floor. But that was it. I was apparently awake and talking by the time the paramedics arrived, but that memory is gone. Only now my short-term memory is healing. I can remember the hospital cafeteria slop I was fed for dinner last night. I can remember when my boss came to drop off a 6-pack of beer disguised in resealed Sprecher root beer bottles. But most of my thoughts were on my daughter. The hospital made me think of her. Or what we had done to her. I had a set of adorable identical twins and life was on its way to a fairy tale until Sophia, the oldest by 4 minutes, started getting sick. And I don't mean physical, visible illness. It sounds so selfish, but I would have preferred cancer, disease, something that could be seen. But the sickness was in her head, and what was almost as bad as Sophia being sick herself was the hate from friends and family. People don't believe that a child could be depressed or paranoid or downright disturbed all on their own. It had to be us. There was an unsaid assumption that if a kid was messed up before puberty, it was the parents' fault. It had to be the nurture because nature took care of kids' minds just fine. Kathleen's lost some friends who accused me of abuse. We had CPS called on us multiple times. We didn't know what to do. We were just a couple of kids ourselves who decided to make a little human being. We were out of our depth. I couldn't stomach the trips to the clinics. Kathleen was used to the cleaning chemical stench and fluorescent strobe of hospital hallways. She said that before her sister, Cindy, lost her fight to a blood disease, her family was always in and out every kind of medical institution. I suppose I have to paint a picture so you can understand why parents would give up on their child. I don't want to be the bad guy here. Sophia liked to torture animals, set things on fire, stare at her mom and I as we slept. Classic serial killer stuff. Her identical twin, Rachel, was normal. We tried expensive child therapy that left bills we couldn't pay. Kathleen couldn't stand the price, but I wanted it to be expensive. I wanted to be able to look myself in the mirror and say my wife and I went into debt to try to help our little girl. We did everything. And when nothing worked, and Sophia killed the neighbor's newfie by using a punji stick trap, she probably told us was perfected by the Viet Cong, we sent her away. I knew this would happen, Kathleen sobbed in the passenger seat after we dropped Sophia at the Rainbow River Young Adult and Child Inpatient Psychiatric Treatment Center. A mouthful of a euphemism for insane asylum. Kathleen couldn't be consoled. She kept crying while my hand bobbed helplessly on her shoulder. Ever since they were babies, the day they were born, I knew it would always be this way. I knew we'd be here. I thought she was just being hard on herself. I didn't even think to ask how she could possibly know. There's nothing we could have done different, I said. That's not true. She sniffed up her snot and wiped her eyes. We never had to have kids in the first place. This is the part that's personal. A part that I know most parents would omit, but when we got home I was 100 pounds lighter. Sophia was gone, as far as I was concerned. When people asked, I had one daughter. We were a 3-person family now, and even our Christmas card would suggest so. We were one of those families with a dark secret, one that new friends would never learn no matter how close they got to us. Too embarrassing to ever tell. Too easy to just forget. A daughter locked away. After a while I really did begin to forget about her. Since Rachel and Sophia were identical, it wasn't hard to picture I had just one kid. There was no face I had to forget. If I saw Sophia in my dreams, it was easy to lie to myself and say it was Rachel. The only time my fantasy crumbled was when Rachel would ask about her. But as time went on, she asked less and less. Life was a fairy tale again, although with a little more of a dark Disney-esque twist. That was 2 years before I fell down the stairs, and to be honest, I hadn't gone to see Sophia since. 3 days later I got home from the hospital and my life was the same as it was there, just with less linoleum. I was propped up in bed with the curtains drawn and the lights dimmed. Kathleen and Rachel had both been rather quiet since I woke up in that hospital bed. My girls were noisy, they had loud laughs and perhaps obnoxious voices if you didn't love them. But the doctors recommended no loud noises, so I was stuck in this subdued world for another couple weeks. The first day Kathleen came and she set my food tray on the bedside table. I know it's against protocol, honey, but can you please just give me a hearty laugh? Hell, a yell? Just something other than silence, I said. She tilted her head but didn't smile. You know I can't do that, she nearly whispered. You had a brain bleed. I paused and gently grabbed her wrist. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Where's your ring? She withdrew her hand from my grasp and smiled sadly. What? I nearly yelled as she walked toward the door. Kathleen, what happened when I fell? What did I do? Suddenly, I was stricken with guilt. Did I do something awful that I couldn't remember? Kathleen? I called, but she said nothing and closed the bedroom door gently behind her. Suddenly, I was afraid. Something was wrong. Even if she wasn't mad at me, Kathleen being able to keep quiet easily made sense. She was an adult and would take the doctor's orders seriously. But Rachel, it seemed easy for Rachel too. She didn't need any reminders to keep her voice down or play quieter. She seemed, for the first time in her life, disturbed. Just like her sister. Night was the only time I could move around. Light in nearly any amount still made my brain throb. When it was well past dark, Kathleen still hadn't come up yet, and I figured she was watching TV in the basement so she wouldn't bug me. Or maybe she was avoiding me. I couldn't tell. I went to the kitchen to make myself some food. Kathleen also hadn't been putting her usual amount of love into my meals. They were hastily tossed together. I jumped when I reached the stairs. Rachel was standing on the landing, staring at me. Hey, honey. I swallowed my spit nervously. I was afraid of a little girl. My little girl. But I thought maybe I was right too, because she didn't respond right away. Rachel? Daddy, she paused. I think there's something wrong with Mommy. I turned on the hall light to better look at my daughter. When Rachel was just a toddler, she clipped her cheek on the corner of a coffee table. It was a surprisingly nasty gash, one that I actually hoped would leave a scar. Being a dad is difficult enough, and I wanted something other than hairstyles to tell my girls apart. But Rachel had been so young it healed completely. She and her sister were truly identical. What makes you say that, sweetheart? Lots of things. She was swaying her shoulders now. She said I need to come with her to work tomorrow. That made some sense. Rachel didn't have school the next day. It was parent-teacher conferences, and I couldn't look after her myself. Well, she's your mother, honey. You have to listen to her. Why don't you go back to bed? It's late. We'll talk about it in the morning. Rachel walked up the rest of the stairs towards her room. She stood in her doorway and stared at me. She was waiting for me to tell her I loved her, surely. But I just bit my tongue, looking her over, and she said nothing, not even good night, and simply closed her door. I freeze this frame every day now. I play it back in my brain again and again. Rachel staring at me from the doorway. Waiting. I didn't know it then, it was subtle the way sinister things are, but I'm certain that was the worst moment of my life. The next day I woke up early and found Kathleen's side of the bed still empty. Cold. The bedding not even pulled back. It was an overcast day, but even if it were sunshine and clear skies, I knew I had to get out of bed. I knew something was wrong. Kathleen was not the type to sleep on the couch. I dialed Sophia's treatment center and was greeted with the kind cadence of receptionist who listens to panicked parents day in and day out. Hello, this may seem like a weird question, but I'm Sophia Davis's father. I'm wondering if she's there now. Or if she has been suddenly acting different. She confirmed my identity with my number and clicked her tongue against her teeth. Just a second, sir. Hold music. Elevator music, saucy saxophones were the soundtrack of my life falling apart. It wasn't going to be John Williams. That's just not how life works. As reality cruelly unfolds, it likes to play little jokes like that to laugh along to your pain. Your life is falling apart, listen to this sax riff. Sir, your daughter is fine. Her behavior the last few weeks has been reported as normal. Are you sure it's her? You see, she has a sister. Yes, we're certain it's Sophia. Thank you. I said quickly and hung up. I went outside, stumbling into the backyard to see if Kathleen's car was gone. But something caught my eye in the grass. It was my wife's phone. Stone cold and wet with dew. It was dead, and I walked inside quickly to charge it. There would be something on there that would tell me what was going on. Texts to her best friend. Google searches. But it was nothing like that. When it turned on, she had dozens of missed calls and texts. 100 notifications. Her phone had been off for days. 4 days exactly. I was able to figure out from the age of the oldest notification. The texts were concerning. An angry boss. Her friends thinking that she was mad at them. But the voicemails. There were several. All from a psychiatric center. A Dr. Renner had left voicemail after voicemail. I yanked the phone from the charger and paced where I had space in backyard to listen to them. I knew then why my wife was prophetic about Sophia's fate. Why she was so sure ever since our girls were born that Sophia would end up in a psych center. I dropped the phone back to the grass. The side door to the garage was slightly ajar. But I already had a feeling of what was inside. I pushed the door open, and laying in a circle of dried blood was my wife. Wedding ring shining on her finger. From the flies and the stench, I knew she'd been dead for days. My wife was here. Dead. That means I sent Rachel with her. I told her to listen to her mom. I ignored my daughter's gut and didn't even tell her good night. I killed my girl with those words. I can't pretend I didn't. Because that wasn't her mother. Kathleen's sister, Cindy, is alive. And they're twins. Identical, just like my daughters. As it turns out, Cindy likes to torture and kill things too, and she escaped from her insane asylum.